All right, so I guess we'll get started. So welcome on this gray Saturday morning. We're here very early. So welcome to the panel on women in media. So basically, each of you will have 15 to 20 minutes to speak, and I'll kind of use these to give you some time warnings when your time is coming close to being done. And after each person speaks, we'll take maybe 1 to 2 questions, just questions for clarification or just any kind of small questions like that. And then any kind of larger questions that you might think of that could possibly generate a discussion after all of the speakers have gone would be great. And then hopefully we can have a bit of a discussion afterward. So I guess we'll welcome our first panelists. So we have Chiara, did I say that right? Great. So we have Chiara here, and she'll be presenting on rebellion, software, and space, women's activities in Saudi Arabia. Chiara got her PhD at the Center for Interdisciplinary Methodologies at the University of Warwick, and is currently completing her postdoctoral fellowship at the Institute of Digital Humanities at École Polytechnique Fédérale de la Somme, where she is also deputy director of the institute. Her research interests lie at the intersection of computational social sciences, software studies, and gender and women's studies in developing countries. So welcome, Chiara.
Hi, thank you very much. I will start. Hang on. How do I read? Huh?
The mic as well.
Okay. How do I get rid of that? So I don't use Windows. I don't know how to do it. Okay. Okay, so so far during the conference we've been talking very much about activism. My research has been focusing on activities, women's activities and women's issues in Egypt and Saudi Arabia. I've been studying them since 2009, starting really in 2006. And today I'm going to present some of the results, but really I want to more reflect on the speciality of software and the emergence of a number of issues in Saudi Arabia. So first of all, who are women in Saudi Arabia? What is the condition of women in Saudi Arabia? We don't want to talk about condition, but what is the status of women in Saudi Arabia? I would say it's a status of invisibility, whether we like it or not. There exist segregated spaces, so there are spaces for women in shopping malls, restaurants, even McDonald's. So there are single sections, family sections, women's sections, men's sections. Of course, there is a source of anonymity. Women are asked to cover their heads, their faces, their hands, and they have to wear what it's called the abaya in the country, and it has to be black. But most importantly, women need a guardian. So if they want to go around, whatever they want to do, they need a guardian, which is a male relative. And this has put them in what the Human Rights Watch has called the perpetual status of being a minor. Of course, digital revolution in Saudi Arabia, as well as in the Middle East, has been very much in the news with the Arab Spring. Everybody was talking about liberation, empowerment. It's very easy, in a way, to talk about liberation and empowerment when we talk about the digital media applied to the Middle East and especially women. Albrecht Hofheinz has called this sort of empowerment and liberation things, nixtopia, meaning every time there is a new technology coming in the Middle East, everybody's like, oh, they're going to liberate women, they're going to liberate people. In reality, in Saudi Arabia, there is still no freedom of speech. Political association is forbidden. Anything that is perceived offensive by the government or by the police may be punished by capital, may receive capital punishment and therefore death. Activists have been arrested. The first activist you see over here is Raif Badawi. He's been accused of apostasy because he's a secularist and he had a blog and actually was discussing about the secularist and tolerant Saudi Arabia. The other two, respectively 15 and 17, they have been sentenced to death. The last one has been sentenced to crucifixion because they participated to the Arab Spring. And when I say participated, probably they just went on the street and walked. But there are serious issues with the country. So when we make generalization about how social media can liberate countries, probably through my research, I kind of realized that sometimes when you talk about digital revolution, we're talking about something that perhaps for us is very given for granted, but it's not in other contexts. However, Saudi Arabia has a very interesting history, which is still untold, of online activism and resistance. Since the 90s, women and men in Saudi Arabia, and especially the expats living in London, have been working on mirror sites, newsletter sites, guerrilla emails, software hiding IP addresses, so they can access whatever the country filters, because the country has got a very strong filtering system in place, so much so that if anything that is offensive to Islam can be filtered and may not be accessed from within the country. Almost all activism happens online, but when we talk about activism, it's a bit different from what we are used to. It's not forms of people coming together and complaining and taking action or trying to challenge certain status quo. They do all of this, but most of the time it stays online. Women have been active participants in this debate of moving the country forward, of course denouncing the double standards of the country, which has to deal with wealth coming from oil and this very traditionalist sort of approach to lifestyle, to life, and in the country. From 2006, I've been following and interacting with activists in Egypt and bloggers in Saudi Arabia. I cannot call them activists in Saudi Arabia, although they are activists. And I have mapped their campaigns. I followed them, and in many cases, I've also contributed to in different ways. But I realized that being a person coming from the outside, I needed a bit of a background, so I studied the Quran and its applications, the controversies surrounding the application of the Sharia in the country, and of course Saudi Arabia's international position with regards to women's rights, but also what other countries, the silence of other countries towards the violation of human rights in Saudi Arabia. What is the women's status in Saudi Arabia? According to the country's own interpretation of the Sharia, women's educational CV should be based on the Quran, which means it would be an educational, a religious CV, a religious education. And women should be only seeking employment in education, for women of course. They cannot travel unaccompanied, they cannot own a passport unless signed by a male relative. Ideally, they shouldn't leave the house unaccompanied, and they couldn't work without permission, cannot open a bank account without permission. They have to cover their times, themselves at all times, and they have their own dedicated spaces. They can't vote. Well, voting in elections is another massive issue in Saudi Arabia, but I'm just going to talk about women at the moment. And they had access to for the first time in municipal elections in 2015, which was actually a massive success for women that went to vote and also participated. And that comes to the gruesome part of it, because, for example, if a woman is raped, she's sentenced to death along with her perpetrator. And that's not only to Saudi Arabia, it doesn't happen only in Saudi Arabia, it happens in many other countries that apply the Sharia, wrongly apply the Sharia. A woman is not considered a reliable witness, so whenever you are in a court, there have to be at least 2 women to count for 1 witness. And despite all of this, women have opposed all of this requirements and have started what the Time and The Economist called some time ago a silent revolution. But another thing has to be taken into consideration: who has started this silent revolution? There are tremendous class divides in Saudi Arabia. So there are wealthy, highly educated Saudi class voices, but other important issues kind of remain silent. However, I don't want to talk about the controversies in what kind of silent revolution, but I want to focus on women. So since 2009, women have ended technical education, but that started way before than 2009. Most of the time, that's what media reports. They are becoming one of the most labor forces in Saudi Arabia. They're highly educated, very ambitious. And in 2014, 2015, the first women-only law firm opened in the kingdom. So they kind of already resisted the idea of having a religious CV and seeking employment in education. There are women's doctors and like normal, whatever you would expect. But most importantly, women are not so silent at all. Like, not so silent. Like, the revolution is not silent. They have been campaigning, making a lot of noise, and against the driving ban, which is a major issue for women in the country, women that own a driving license in the country, because women in cities cannot drive. There is a major divide between what happens in urban spaces and what happens in rural spaces. So women in major cities cannot drive. They need a driver, and that creates logistical problems. Not just women cannot go around. There are logistical problems, loads of traffic, always being late for work, and so on and so forth. So since the 90s, women have been resisting this ban, which has no foundation, not in the Quran, not in the Sharia, nowhere, and they have taken to the streets. So they have been driving for the first time in Riyadh at the beginning of the 90s. 10 women took the street and just drove. But they have repeated this campaign. They have done it in 2011, 2012, 2013. But most importantly, most of the coordination and whatever they talk about and they think about the driving ban happens online. So I have been tracing all of what is that happens online. How do women in Saudi Arabia voice and trace, and most importantly, campaign for their rights? This is a combined network graph that I have created of Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the one more towards the external, more at the periphery, whereas Egypt is the one at the center. So I tried as much as I could to turn into grey so you wouldn't be confused. So as you can see, driving ban is one of the issues, which is in the one in pink, in purple. But then there are other issues that have emerged online. So why is it important to understand what are the issues? Most of the time when we talk about women's issues in the Middle East, we immediately think, oh well, there is the veil, there is the woman is a second-class citizen. But when you move onto online, you see new forms of activism happening, new issues emerge, and these issues emerge only through the digital, the software, the algorithm, simply because there is no formal association. There have been organizations based in the region in defense of women's rights, but most of the activities happen online. So I wanted to understand how relevant is the driving ban, and how relevant are issues that for us might be very important, like the veil. How relevant is it for them to live in segregated spaces and so on and so forth. So I've just followed all of these issues, and actually the results were kind of different from what I expected, because the driving ban is a major issue. This is mainly blogs, forums, and newspaper articles, but if you follow on Twitter, Twitter is the place where, and YouTube of course, they are both places where women actually complain about not driving, being unable to drive, and so on and so forth. There have been many campaigns, and probably the most famous one is #WomenToDrive, and there is a dedicated YouTube channel, and so on and so forth. But what emerges online to me was very important, because it's not just about the driving ban they talk about. There are also many other things that become extremely political. So we talk about divorce and marriage in Saudi Arabia, arranged marriages, personal thoughts, poems, poetry, Saudi politics. Like they're very opinionated about Saudi politics. And then there are issues about Israel and Palestine. So the issue network that emerges is way more than we actually expect. And of course, the driving ban is a major aspect of it, but the network makes you understand, well, it's a country where there is no activism, but for being a country where there is no formal activism. People can't take the street or do a strike, but they are making their issues emerge very, very clearly. Like, their voices are very well heard, and it was very interesting because they also talk very much about the problem of being represented in the media. So how Arab media are represented, how women are represented, Arab women are represented in international media. So there are loads of issues that, of course, they are very conscious of what's going on in the country, but that is their way of contributing and resisting. And how do they resist? Like, first of all, it is a clear small world of bloggers, and they are actually very linked to each other. What I found very interesting is that they don't come together. They don't meet up to oppose the government. They talk, and they talk with their own digital artifacts, with a video. They talk with a post. They talk with a Tumblr, and so on and so forth. So what emerges is more a network of issues, which I've called an issue network, because the bloggers do link to each other. Probably they know each other in real life. We do not. I don't know that. But the organization that you see, it's a non-organization because it is not structured. It comes across as, well, they have something to say. Each individual takes on different digital artifacts, and through the digital artifacts they talk, they rant, whatever it is. Certainly there are loads of things, but I'm just going to go. So that made me think that probably what we have to think about is rethink the way in which we define activism or even social action, because in this case, the Saudi Arabia is probably the most interesting one, as that software, if you consider software as a series of writing acts that have changed our expectation of what can show up in everyday world, we can actually make sense of what are these campaigns that are taking place. What is a post, a sort of rebellion, is a blog post, is a video uploaded and shared online, does it count as activism? But most importantly, women and their issues, what they perceive as issues, as I could see on the digital layer, they have acquired a certain level of visibility. So the software has become the background, but also the platform. And I know that when I talk platform and you talk about software engineers, they get very defensive. But it's a platform of action that makes the driving ban a political form of activism. But anything else, so marriage and arranged marriages and so on and so forth. So it is not activism per se, but it is the issue that becomes important, and is the accrued value of the issue. So the research, and I'm gonna finish in this one, the research on the Occupy movements has shown how the use of multiple media is not just convergence, but a complex integration of simultaneously overlapping, mediated and co-located environments. The analysis that I've carried out on women's online activities has revealed a dense network of issues, women's platforms, acts of rebellion that make women acquire space. And to me, what is important and what is that I would like to probably discuss a bit more is how space is acquired through something that happens online. It's digital, it's not virtual, because it happens, it exists, it is real issues, but this space, the women leave out that sort of invisibility through digital artifacts, to software, to algorithm, and so on and so forth. So it's what I call like geography of the issue, but it could get many other names. So, and that's what's hopefully we can discuss about this. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chiara. Does anybody have any kind of just quick questions or clarifications to ask of Chiara?
Do you want more discussion later?
More discussion later, yeah. All right. So I think we'll move on. We have Dr. Neelamalar is up next. So Dr. Neelamalar will be presenting on Community Radio for Women's Development, a case study of successful models in India. She has her PhD and is presently working as an assistant professor in the Department of Media Sciences at Anna University in Chennai, India. She has a total teaching experience of 15 years, and she has published research articles in various national and international journals. She has presented papers in national and international conferences, and for this purpose, she has visited countries such as the US, the UK, Hong Kong, and Mauritius. She has authored 4 books on media and also a fiction on research scholars. So welcome, Dr. Neelamalar. You can start, yeah.
Good morning to everyone present here. Yes, the topic of my presentation will be Community Radio for Women's Development, a case study of successful models in India. Okay, so let us start with a very brief definition and history of community radio in India. Community radio, as well known to everyone, they are operated, owned and driven by the community they serve. And it is not for profit and provides a mechanism for facilitating individuals, groups and communities to tell their own diverse stories, to share experiences, and in a media-rich world to become active creators and contributors of media. So, community radio, the concept of it differs from country to country. It means different. It has got different meanings in countries such as United Kingdom, Ireland, United States, Canada, Australia, and India. It's termed as people's radio, which reflects the hopes, needs, and aspirations of a community and provides a forum to share their views, problems, and concerns. And community radio is something confined to a small geographical area using low power transmission covering a radius not more than 20 to 30 kilometers. It serves a community which uses common resources for livelihood, has common development issues and concerns which are relatively localized. And UNESCO, it has got its own definition for community radio as a medium that gives voice to the voiceless, that serves as the mouthpiece of the marginalized. So let us start with a brief history of community radio station in India. The long demand for starting private non-profit radio station resulted in the Government of India releasing a set of guidelines for community radio in 2003. Following this, community radio stations started to evolve in India. The different types of community radio in India involves campus community radio by non-governmental organization, and rural community radio. And both NGOs and educational institutions have got special programs for the development and empowerment of women. While some are for both men and women, certain community radio stations cater exclusively to the needs and requirements of women. And first of all, what is the necessity of such community radio station in India? Because India is a vast country with multilingual and a multicultural setup. Hence, Indian women belonging to different states of India have got their own individual needs, and a single medium cannot serve all their needs. So, community radio can serve the needs of those who are not covered or curbed by the mainstream medium. The basic objectives of community radio in India is to serve a particular community which needs some development or the other. Let us have a brief look at the different community radio stations operating in India at present. Let us start with Sangam Radio. This radio is entirely owned and run by members of women group and supported by DVS, Deccan Development Society, that has been working for the poor, landless and Dalit women of Zahirabad. So it has discarded the traditional top-down model of development and focuses on creating awareness and educating villagers on biodiversity, crop pattern, nutrition, health, culture, sovereignty, etc. among women. This radio is also giving training for Dalit women in filmmaking. Women in the community actually ideate, script, anchor, shoot and edit film with the guidance of the people of the radio. So it is also a part of UNESCO's Women Speak to Women project. And who are the actual target women? The target women are Dalit women of Hyderabad belonging to the particular area and consisting of nearly 4,000 members in 75 villages. These women form the poorest sections of the rural community with an average family income ranging from Rs 600 to Rs 1,200 per month, which is actually very less. So what type of program they produce? They produce programs and information specific to agricultural needs of semi-arid region, education and literacy, both formal and informal, public health and hygiene, environmental and ecological issues, biodiversity and food security, gender justice, local and indigenous knowledge system, local cultures with emphasis on the narrative traditions of song and drama. So how actually this radio helps women? The Sangam radio are supported by the DDS or Deccan Development Society that has been working for the poorest, landless, Dalit women of Hyderabad for the past 25 years, helping them reclaim their lives from the relentless forces of globalization. It also imparts practical knowledge to women. For example, how to buy goats, how to raise them, and how to get profit out of it. So the feedback received from the women whom this radio serves is actually quite positive. They feel that the mainstream media has no time for them and it does not provide micro details needed for them. And they speak very broadly. But for the poor, community radio helps a lot by providing micro experiences and micro details. The next one we can see about is Rudino Radio. It is run by SAIYERE, Self-Employed Women's Association based in Ahmedabad, India. The SAIYERE radio's research highlighted the medium of radio as an untapped source of education and communication. So this radio is available through two formats. One is All India Radio and the other one is as a community radio termed Rudino Radio. The target woman for this radio is the woman of Gujarat. The types of program they produce range from health related ones, usage of solar energy, education, handicrafts, agriculture, etc. So how it helps women? The Rudino radio team organizes training, workshops, exposure visits, video replays within their own listeners group. And the feedback again is positive from the community. They say that the radio is useful to know about the women's work in the field of handicrafts and milk cooperative, awareness on environment is provided to them, motivation on tree plantation and minimal usage of water or some other objectives raised by this particular radio. Moving on to the next one, Desh Bhagat Radio. Their philosophy is to lend unconditional service to the society by disseminating information regarding issues and subjects relevant to the community. One of the famous programs of the radio is Shakti, the power of a woman. It's a talk show and the Pro-Chancellor of Desh Bhagat University actually for this program interviews women from a cross-section of the society to present live examples of courage and inspiration to the women listeners. So their target people here are women, but more than them, the youth, the younger generation of the country. So they produce programs to create awareness on drug usage involving school students and youth. And the feedback obtained from one of the listeners is, thank you for support and help to the Pink Chain of Hope for awareness of breast cancer. The next one is SAIYERE Jo Radio. It's Kut's first community radio station. It was started by the collective effort of the entire community. especially women's initiative. So it faced certain problems, especially financial challenges, then it was able to retain its status. So basically they also had a publication called Uja's publication, but they felt that, they found that Uja's publication was not able to reach a vast majority due to the poor literacy level. So when they conducted a survey long back in 1998-99, they understood that radio is the preferred medium for people to access information, and then they started this radio. And they target all women of the community, all women belonging to Kuch, and they have various programs with all formats including drama, phone-in, interviews and news reporting. They also have a 30-minute weekly program that is as a radio magazine comprising of different formats of radio. So they also provide legal help and legal programs, and especially on domestic violence, which is a great problem against women, not only in India but in many parts of the world. So they provide awareness and legal advice to people on such domestic violence, and also on issues of physical and mental abuse to women in Kuch. So for the past 15 years, it has evolved as a socio-legal knowledge center. And the feedback obtained from the listeners is, commitment to introspection in our experience is rare. It is a learning organization. There is a continuous process of experimentation, reflection and conceptualization. So on the whole, they are quite happy with the kind of education, especially legal area, important to them. One more radio, Babu Banarasi Das Radio. It covers the villages near the region of Lucknow, run by Babu Banari Das University of Lucknow. They have many programs for women, one among them being Maye, which means a mirror to women. They basically target students and also the entire community. The type of program they produce vary from health, education, environment, community development, scientific awareness, cultural and social welfare, civic and social issues, etc. So the feedback here is improvement in confidence level has been obtained after listening to the radio programs. Kumanwani radio is at such a great altitude. It reaches out to nearly 500 villages belonging to the region, and the main objectives, one of the main objectives of this radio is for the farmers to improve their livelihood by providing them relevant information and knowledge. Focus on sustainable agriculture, forestry and biodiversity, delivery of government welfare programs, and accountability in local governance is one of the motives of the radio. And the impact is that it spreads awareness on health, education, water and sanitation. Moving on to a campus community radio called Holy Cross Community Radio. It was launched in 2006. It is supported by Russia. It has one of the programs titled Science for Women's Health and Nutrition, which is supported by the Russia Vigyan Evam Prodyogiki Sanchar Parishad, that is belonging to the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, and implemented by Commonwealth Educational Media Center for Asia. So they exclusively target women, this particular radio, and they basically help women by creating awareness on AIDS, cancer and other such health problems. And also it aims to create awareness about about human rights and women's laws among women. The feedback obtained from the community is that the radio has increased their self-confidence, generated awareness about pollution, health and hygiene, and helped in their personality development. Last but not least, I would like to present about Anna FM, the campus community radio run by our own university, that is the university where I do work. And one of the credits enjoyed by the university, enjoyed by this Anna FM is that It is the first campus community radio started in entire India in the year 2004. The purpose of Anna Community Radio or Anna FM is to uplift the local community residing near Anna University, Chennai by creating awareness on healthcare, education, female literacy, self-employment, clean environment, etc. Anna Community Radio programs are produced by the community and for the community. The reach is within a radius of approximately 15 kilometers. The target women for this radio belong to female listeners above the age of 50 in the Anna FM coverage zone extending to a radius and including Kanyapuram and Kochupuram areas. The types of programs they produce are programs for the visually challenged, lifestyle programs, discussion, career guidance, community pulse, and awareness on HIV, tree planting, women health self-help groups, community maintenance of beaches, unique community views on national anthem and superstitions. So the impact they produce on women is equipping them to be program producers. So let us quickly see what type of development model is being followed by community radio stations in India. The two models I have given here are pro-persuasion model of development. That is, there is persuasive communication and for that technological innovations are adopted, resulting in individual and national development. This is being followed as community radio is a technology which is added along with the persuasion of the people who run radio, aiming basically for women or for individual development as well as for the nation's development. One more model, change agency communication and mass media model for development. Here you have literacy and mass media exposure plus change agency interpersonal communication. Along with that, there is adoption of technological innovation resulting in individual and national development. This is also being followed by community radio stations in India, as in addition to their mass media exposure through community radio, most of them also indulge in reaching the community personally, going to them, speaking with them, conducting survey among them. So all these are nothing but interpersonal communication. So most of the community radio stations in India actually merge interpersonal communication with the technological innovation or mass media. So again, aiming for individual and national development. So what actually has been implemented through community radio? First of all, grassroots participation. The so-called marginalized people are actually able to take part in the program production of community radio station, and women are the chief category among the marginalized people in India. So they are given special preference by most of the community radio stations, and they are made to participate in the program production and execution. And there is this community empowerment. That is, empowerment related communicative media and actions can lead to progressive grassroots change which can improve people's life and gradually create openings for broader macro level changes. So this community empowerment is happening through grassroots participation by community radio stations. So providing a list of activities for facilitating the process of community empowerment, the activities that enhance experience and competence, enhancing group structure and capacity, removing social and environmental barriers, enhancing environmental support and resources. So these are some of the activities happening to community radio also. And finally, in India, community radio signifies a social change process where members of the community who are women here increasingly influence the agenda, design and outcomes of the community radio. That brings me to the end of the presentation. I have a video of 3 minutes. If time allows, I can show it.
I think you've got about 3 minutes left. So.
Exactly. That's nice. I'll play it. Where is it? What's it?
important tool of communication which helps to empower the society, and it creates a strong engagement with local communities to discuss the issues that concerns their lives and livelihood. It also caters to the development and empowerment of women in a remarkable way. Radio Brahmaputra. Radio Brahmaputra is the first community radio that has started serving the local communities in underdeveloped northeastern part of India. The radio got wireless operating license from Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. Brahmaputra Radio is producing programs for different age groups, and one of the signature programs called Chai Gazar Maja Maja is focusing on women development in an effective way. Babu Banarasi Das Community Radio. Babu Banarasi Das Community Radio serves the northern part of the country. The motto of BBD Community Radio is Shaping Generations. They say that women empowerment needs a voice. The programs are exclusively designed for the state of Lucknow and the local communities on issues concerning health, education, environment, scientific information, cultural development, social welfare, etc., which help to improve knowledge and to empower women in all effective ways. Kumon Vani Community Radio. Kumon Vani Community Radio is located in hilly region of Uttarakhand to promote the sustainable development among local farming community. Women in local community are trained in radio jockeying, editorial and technical production. They collect ideas, feedback and voices from different areas, and based on the feedback they have designed programs on sustainable agricultural practices, practical solutions related to crops, fertilizers and on effective delivery of government welfare scheme, which improves knowledge about sustainable agriculture among women. Sangam. Sangam Community Radio serves the South India. It is entirely owned and run by members of women groups and supported by Deccan Development Society that has been working for the poor, landless and the Dalit women of Zahirabad. The Sangam Radio has discarded the traditional top-down development approach and focuses on creating awareness and educating villagers on biodiversity, crop patterns, nutrition, health, culture, sovereignty, etc. among women. This radio is also giving training for Dalit women in filmmaking. Women in the community ideate script, anchor, shoot and edit their films with their guidance. Holy Cross Community Radio. Holy Cross Community Radio is also from South India. Women in Dharmanadapuram and Jeevanagar community are their target audience, which are the major slum areas in Trichy. Pudhiya Yajnam and Science for Women's Health and Nutrition are the two programs which created awareness about women and children's health, human rights, women's law, hygienic food practice, cleanliness among women. This campus community radio helps the women to engage themselves in community activity that leads to the women empowerment and development.
Thank you for patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Neelamalar. Does anybody happen to have any questions, just some quick clarifications or anything like that to ask of her? Okay, so I think we'll jump right on to the next presentation here. So we have Megan Boler and Jenna Jacobson. They're presenting on women's mediated connectivity and visibility on YouTube. So Megan Boler is a professor in the Department of Social Justice Education at OISE, or the University of Toronto. She teaches in the areas of media and digital activism, cultural studies, philosophy, and race, class, and gender in social and political contexts. Her books include Feeling Power, Emotions and Education, Digital Media and Democracy, Tactics in Hard Times, and DIY Citizenship, Critical Making and Social Media. We also have Jenna Jacobson here, who is a PhD candidate in the Faculty of Information, University of Toronto. From mining big social media data to analyzing little data, her research interests lie at the intersection of new media, identity, and community. And Jenna's research is focused on the use, impact, and social implications of new media in society. Jenna works at Ryerson University's Social Media Lab and at the University of Toronto's Semaphore Lab as well. So welcome to Megan Boler and Jenna Jacobson. is terrible. That is a very low percentage. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jenna Jacobson, and this is my co-author, Megan Boler. So despite ongoing campaigns to persuade popular opinion that sexism is gone and feminism has finished its work, the glaring absence of women controlling cameras and having equitable access to the means of production and distribution remains a persistent crisis. Following their 2-year review of the film industry, in 2015, the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, demanded that federal and state agencies investigate the systematic bias in film and television hiring practices. The ACLU found that only 1.9% of directors of the top 100 grossing films in 2013 and 2014 were by women, and also that only 14% of television film directors were women. By contrast, at this year's 2016 Hot Doc Film Festival, a panel of female cinematographers came together to discuss their experiences and their insights as women employed in the industry. In this space, we have, in documentary filmmaking, women make up approximately 50% at this year's Hot Doc Film Festival. And one reason for this, perhaps, is that documentary film production is often focused on issues of social justice, and documentaries are often unpaid or rarely paid. Nonetheless, in this panel, women discussed the glass ceiling that was encountered by all women in film production. Within this context, women making vlogs may represent a promising way for women to broadcast themselves on social media platforms like YouTube. The question that we focus on today is, as the idealized poster child of YouTube, how and when does vlogging allow or afford women the ability to represent themselves on their own terms, free from the usual constraints of Hollywood's stereotyped and policed gender norms, and also the all too familiar objectification of women's bodies to sell content to the almighty advertiser? So what is a vlog? A vlog is the video evolution of text-based blog. They're generally short and then are posted online, where authors create a channel and then other users can subscribe. Vlogs are largely shaped by the viewer interactions, by the like, dislike button, and also by comments that users leave. As a public venue, many women use the vlogging format and the platform of YouTube to gain recognition in hopes of perhaps establishing a YouTube channel where they can then catch the eye of web marketers, lead to sponsored posts, or even in the commercial industry. Women may seek visibility that will lead them into the world of comedy, performance, or even Hollywood. Another category of vloggers is those that seek a more personal connection and seek a more personal expression, wanting to connect with others. These are the women that we are focusing on in our research.
YouTube is not exactly female friendly. If you look at all the people that are, the big vloggers, or at least they started out as vloggers, there are very few women that are successful, and even the ones that are successful are nowhere near the numbers of the men. So I think what I'm implying is YouTube is kind of a boys' club, which so's the world. Well, I think the boys are really...
As Toby here attests, some women seeking to produce blogs that go beyond the typical consumer-oriented or stereotypical beauty or haul videos where people show their hauls of what they bought at malls. These women often face genuine challenges in terms of garnering a following and attention in a saturated world of YouTube and digital popular culture. Vlogs often represent these gendered stereotypes, as women and girl vloggers predominantly produce vlogs about makeup, cosmetics, weight loss, while men in this space dominate in video games, sports, and bodybuilding. Today, what we're going to be presenting is our research based off of a 12-month period in which we examined women's vlogging practices.
Given the scarcity of gender in vlogging, we were motivated to examine first how access to social media platforms, the camera and the means of production and distribution enable women to broadcast themselves, how women negotiate the social platform of YouTube, what kinds of challenges and constraints exist for women vloggers, and finally, how and when do women actually get a sense of control of their images and representations. We did this by following 75 women vloggers online and their video streaming and their vlogs over a 9-month period. Then we went on to actually conduct in-depth interviews with 6 of these vloggers with a 2-hour Skype interview while also familiarizing ourselves with their vlogs very extensively. We sought to follow vloggers which didn't fall within this predominant norm of beauty or haul videos, but rather we looked at women who were slightly different, slightly had something more personal connection. So using discourse analysis and grounded theory, we examined and analyzed these women's vloggers' habits, their networks, their connections, the productions, and their interactions with other vloggers, as well as their viewers on YouTube.
You mentioned community and YouTube being a little town. Would you say that there is a distinct women vlogger community?
Yeah, there is. It actually makes me really sad because the biggest group of women on YouTube are all beauty gurus. So women who come together and talk about makeup, hair, clothes, diet products. Yeah. I'm glad that they're doing something that makes them happy and fulfilled in their life. But as somebody who's, I know that these people could, whatever. I don't want to, but I just feel like I don't understand why it has to be the only time I see women on. There are some women out there who talk about other things, but it's so small compared to the women who are on there, doing this how to make yourself look better stuff. It is what it is.
So what we see here is perhaps our most famous vlogger. This is Lacey Green. Some of you may have encountered her. She's massive online with over 1.5 million subscribers to her channel. When we interviewed her a few years ago, she was not nearly quite as big. I'm not sure whether she'd speak to us now, but she introduces herself as a young, heterosexually identified woman, but now in this space, she's really attained celebrity status, and she vlogs about women's sexuality more generally, as well as sex education. So as Lacey identifies, in contrast to this typical vlogging that often happens in this space, we sought to identify vloggers that first, whose work maintained a space outside of these normative perimeters of this genre. Also, that women were a diversity of ages, of their motivations, of sexual orientation, of racial diversity, and these women were really committed to their audience and to other vloggers. So within this, we identified 3 themes. First, the male gaze. Second, self-curation. And thirdly, intentional connectivity. And what we look at is how the women are juggling the contradictions and the paradoxes in vlogging. How and when does women's vlogging allow themselves to represent themselves on their own terms, free from all of the stereotypes that are often embedded in this space? Alongside these findings, we share our assessment of how women are juggling their contradictions in this space and making themselves heard and allowing themselves to broadcast themselves. I'm now going to pass it over to my colleague, Megan Boler.
Thanks, Jenna. Good morning, everybody. Again, it's fabulous that you're here at 10 a.m. on a rainy Saturday morning. So picking up from where Jenna left off, I'm just going to take a moment to take you through each of these notions. So the male gaze was a concept that I'm sure all of you have heard. It was first used in 1975 by thinkers like Laura Mulvey and Ann Kaplan. And the notion of the male gaze and the gaze being created for the pleasure of the presumed audience being male. The camera also, positions itself so that the viewer can have that pleasure as the presumed male viewer. It also tends to objectify women's bodies. And as we were beginning to do this analysis, some of the folks we were talking to said, oh, isn't the male gaze a thing of the past? I mean, that's a really old concept. In fact, I'm finding that a lot of folks thinking about visual regimes and visual culture today are returning to notions of the male gaze, even though it might be challenged, or people are thinking about, is there a female gaze, et cetera, or what are the complications of that. But what was clear is that there's a heteronormativity in terms of both how do we see that in terms of the comments that audience and followers leave to the women, and one of those instances we'll talk about a little later on. So, in short, women's bodies continue, as defined by male gaze, to function as a visual commodity for male viewing, pleasure, and consumption. The gaze objectifies women by positioning men behind the camera, as I said, and as Laura Mulvey writes, traditionally, the woman who is displayed has functioned on two levels: as erotic object for the characters within the screen story, and as erotic object for the spectator within the auditorium. So the challenges and contradictions faced by these female vloggers is really, really significant. You don't just break through and say, all right, I'm going to do a different kind of thing, and I'm going to assure that I have people looking at me differently. It's not, what we're finding is it's not that simple. So really, in our attention economy, how do you break through all of the noise of the internet and get followers, right? So obviously, women's bodies are still used to attract the male gaze in all kinds of ways, whether we like it or not. There's one really renowned example of this, not someone who we interviewed. Lacey becomes quite famous since the time we interviewed her. There was also an established Russian vlogger whose vlog is called Hot for Words. Her name is Marina Orlova. She holds a doctorate, a PhD in linguistics and philology, the origin of words. And her vlog presently has a following of 22,000 and over 400,000 on Hot for Nutrition. Actually, it must be more. Anyway, it's huge following. She's quite renowned, and this vlog, to all of us who were studying this, makes very visible the contradictions between, on the one hand, this vast scholarly knowledge she has of all of these words. So she'll ask the audience, what word do you want me to talk about next week? But almost all of the images of her, especially early on, were very intentionally, she had dressed in very scanty lingerie, etc. But as she writes, most of you know me here as Hot for Words, a well-endowed girl educating her web-based audience about the origin of words. I've been described in the press as being, quote, a smart cookie, bright, funny, charismatic, almost intoxicating, with my Russian accent and large blue sparkling eyes, unquote. Though I make no apologies for promoting my love of words through sex appeal, I never considered myself sexy or attractive. And then she talks about why. Then she says, one day I was literally in middle America facing the prospect of marrying a complete stranger so that I could remain in the States. And not too long after that ordeal, fortunately never married him, I became a celebrity on the web and began living life in the fast lane. And so since 2006, she got together with a good partner and coincided with millions of people wanting to view her vlog. During the summer of 2006, YouTube was one of the fastest growing sites on the web. A little bit of historical note. There were more than 65,000 new videos uploaded every day in 2006 and 100 million video views per day. Right. So the experiences of women vloggers is also described by our next interviewee, SAIYERE. And to just say, SAIYERE is now an out lesbian vlogger, African American, and apparently started vlogging because she wanted to do stand-up comedy, and she was following in the footsteps of male black comedians, vloggers.
Yeah, I think with men, they can go right on the camera. Females, they have to do their hair, they have to make sure they look all presentable and all that stuff. But I do the same thing too. Because my hair is always messed up. I gotta throw a hat on, like I gotta, but guys, they don't care. I mean, I'm not gonna say they don't care about their appearance. But they're not so shallow like females. Females want everything to be perfect. And I think guys are probably a little bit more open. Some females definitely are afraid to get in front of the camera. But I tried to get one friend just to help me out with the video. She said, sure, definitely. And I get a text message from her later.
So she goes on a bit, but we just wanted to note that yes, we wanted to note how she's reflecting how difficult it is for women to think about how they get on the screen, what they're going to look like, and her perceptions that men don't have to go through that same question of how they're going to look once they're there and being projected online. So in this comment, SAIYERE to us very poignantly notes, I did this to myself. So when she's talking about some of the pain of being on the camera, she says, but I did this to myself. I put my videos out there for people to look at. And here we really see that catch-22 of what we're calling self-curation, the paradox of trying to interrupt that heteronormative gaze, but the woman ends up blaming herself for any negative feedback. Well, I put myself out there, so what do I expect? Like, we have to expect comments like that, but they don't happen on men's vlogs. So to that point of self-curation, the second concept we wanted to just speak to briefly is how then do women negotiate these contradictions of the male gaze? While they seek to broadcast themselves, as YouTube invites us to, broadcast yourself for a whole range of reasons, one motivation that was common to the 6 women that we spoke to was this desire to take control of their own representations. So we're not going to talk at length about self-curation, but a lot of folks are drawing on that as part of the narrational turn and archiving and how we construct these images. And it does have more of a sense of how do we create a self rather than I'm just on the camera being represented. I have an agency to construct and curate who I am on the camera. In this, we're just going to share with you a very brief clip from one of the oldest woman video bloggers that is online. She is quite well known by all the other women vloggers. She doesn't have a huge following, but all the other women vloggers respect her highly, although she's a very unique and eccentric individual in many ways. But they respect her, they favorite her videos, and in this, she talks about the issues of age.
Sometimes you get a comment that just makes your day. This is from Chris. You're way too old to be using YouTube. Well, Chris, what do you think YouTube is? When I was in my 40s, I had a boyfriend that was your age, exactly. My daughters were really concerned. He's too old.
Yeah, so there's a treat. I'm going to skip this one in. We were going to show another clip, but I'm aware of the time. Sid, a lesbian vlogger and educator from New Mexico, also talks about the kinds of self-determination that she can engage in doing her vlogging. The final point that we wanted to just bring to your attention is, in addition to the self-curation and the male gaze, did women go and start vlogging because they wanted to find other women, because they wanted some kind of women's vlogging community or an experience of that. What was curious to us is that while that was perhaps part of their motivation in establishing a vlog, though there were different motivations. There's the personal vloggers in our category, which are not the beauty vloggers. We didn't quite make clear, but there's the personal vloggers who are doing it for personal reasons, self-growth, self-transformation. Celia was wanting to be a stand-up comic. Lacey Green, I consider an entrepreneurial vlogger. You're waiting to partner with YouTube, and then in her case, she made it. So those different categories. So were they looking for community? So it varies depending on their motivation. But the more personal folks, actually all of them, when we said, is there a women's community? They absolutely rejected the word community, and they would use other terms. And then we'd sometimes say to them, do you find something problematic about the term community as a way to describe it? And they would say yes. And so we have come up with this notion of intentional connectivity, because they're definitely trying to figure out how to connect with other women.
Yeah, it's a weird one, because you do tend to find the same people in the same places, and then you realise, whenever I go to, if I find someone new, I'm finding the same people there, and then you realise, maybe I'm a part of this group as well. I sort of count it a bit like high school groups, or being in school, where you have like the cool gang, you have like the cool gang, the sporty gang, and then the misfits gang. And I always consider myself as being one of the misfits who didn't quite fit into any of the big groups.
So you can see she's talking about the different kind of cliques that exist in the YouTube vlogging scene, or different vlogging scenes. At that time, people were also using Vloggerheads and other platforms. So moving towards our conclusion then, there's a general ambivalence about these conceptions of community, as there is about conceptions of gender that these women have expressed. And our data suggests that there's, with this strong diversity of community-making practices in online video sharing platforms, they are all linked to different kinds of embodiment that women speak about and experience through this self-curation. And in the very few studies that have been done on gender and blogging, this is repeatedly shown to be the case. This issue of embodiment, self-expression, and these contradictions that we've been speaking to. Most of the participants didn't have this sense of community and were interested in the relationships. And it ended, and if you could bring it up, and Jenna's just going to conclude.
I don't know what just happened here.
Oh,
There we go. Okay, so within the long histories of systematic exclusion of women from...
Sorry to interrupt. Bear with us for 1 second. Can you do this slide?
Yeah.
Because Lacey, we just wanted to do Lacey because there was an interesting moment at the beginning of Lacey. I'll just finish reading that. When we first interviewed Lacey, we had noticed that she had this really large following. She also happened to be quite scantily clad in much of it, or the shots are almost always quite personal from here, right? And there was a very large following, and we said, what do you make of this following, and why do you think there's so many men? And her response was, where's the quote? I was surprised when I first started posting because the majority of my audience were older men, and I never really understood that. And actually, as I became more internet savvy, it was something that I would talk about in my videos. And that was my own ignorance for the demographics, for the topics I was talking about, which were sex education and now like feminism and sexuality. A lot of people who are interested in philosophical discussions are older men. So what we saw at that moment was an interesting way that she was trying to piece together the fact that there was this following of older men, and we didn't want to push, but we were wondering what is the relationship of her self-presentation and the followers. So
we'll just have to wrap it up.
Yep, we are.
So within this long history of women's exclusion, women making blogs appears to represent a promising way for women to broadcast themselves. But YouTube's call to broadcast yourself, should this really be broadcast boys and men, or perhaps just broadcast your breasts? little is known in current scholarship about the gendered experiences of creating user-generated content in social media platforms like YouTube. And despite women's best intentions or motivations, escaping the pervasive realities of misogyny, sexism, homophobia, racism, and ageism in a realm of visual popular culture may just reflect an impossible utopian fantasy given the social realities. But what we see here is a really strong desire and push to allow women to have a space of their own, to share their messages, to create a sense of community or intentional connectivity. And these women have courageously created and negotiated the potent mediations of femininity while simultaneously developing radical modes of self-expression. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Jenna and Megan. Does anybody have any just quick questions or clarifications at the moment? Okay. Yeah, we're going to do discussion right now, and then we can hopefully have a broader discussion around any questions that people have. Yeah. Does anybody kind of want to pose the first question? I can come and share my microphone with you.
Should we just go back and kind of sit around?
Sure, yeah. Oh, yeah, you can go back and sit. You can pass that one around too? Okay, great. Thank you. Got the first question over here, I think.
Yeah. So my question is about the male gaze and male gaze towards women. You said that there's a male gaze towards women, but I wanted to ask if we can also talk about the male gaze towards males as well, because when we look at YouTube videos, we always see really well-built men and not like someone fat, because they would also be critiqued by other men. And I also wanted to ask if you would say that because YouTube is free and it's not an industry like the movie industry or Hollywood, there is an active submission by women towards male gaze, which should also be critiqued because they are opening their bodies and no one is forcing them to open their bodies. What would you comment on that?
Oh,
Yes, your comment about there being stereotypically, quote unquote, handsome or norms of masculine appearance on the web, which are quite similar to what we see in Hollywood or television. So yes, that standard doesn't change, and it doesn't surprise me that men will, when representing themselves or if trying to sell themselves for these entrepreneurial or celebrity reasons, will attempt to embody the stereotypical norms of what it means to be masculine and manly and all of that. Yes, those norms are prevalent. Those are part of patriarchy and part of a visual regime that includes the male gaze. So it's, but that's also part of capitalist and consumer culture, right? I mean, we can talk about that. The second part of your question was the active, right? Well, I think we were addressing that when I said there was a very poignant comment by Celia that she said, well, if I'm encountering negative comments, who's to blame but me? I chose to put myself up here. So I think part of the question is simply because women are doing it, as you said, not for financial gain, I mean, primarily volunteering their time to put themselves in this and publicly express themselves, does that mean that they are to blame for having, quote unquote, submitted themselves to the male gaze? I think what I'm hoping to do through studying women vlogging is to show that this gaze is persistent. It's very hard to evade it, to find ways to circumvent it, to find ways to challenge it. But I don't think it should make any difference whether a woman has done so of her own. I mean, these issues came up when Madonna was making videos, right? We were all excited because, oh my gosh, Madonna directed this herself. She did it herself. She choreographed it. She directed it. So if she's being sexy, she chose that. So at least it's her agency. It's not a male director telling her to do that. Well, we're seeing that in these vlogs as well, but that is not an invitation to objectify women necessarily, right? And it's the same as with rape culture. Oh, you were dressed that way, you deserved what happened. So we're trying to raise questions about these aspects of patriarchy.
You mentioned a quote in your presentation stating that, YouTube is a boys' club, right? I just, our previous discussion also, in a way centered on that. So I would just like to, tell about the situation in India, where it's not just a boys' club. Even women are also given full freedom, to post whatever they want. It's like, they can upload the videos. And what happens as a result, I feel, in a country like India, there is a kind of democratization of the media. So if you take only, in the absence of YouTube, if you have to rely on traditional media, like television or whatever, even films, only women, not all women were given a chance, right, to post themselves on media, especially women who are quite good looking, quite fair. In India, the color of the skin also matters. So people who are, fair and good looking, only those kind of women were getting a chance. But once the YouTube comes, anyone can, actually upload their videos. So what happened as a result? People who want to make use of the medium, especially for their entrepreneurship, they are just sharing their skills, wisdom. It can be on cookery, it can be on beauty, but whatever it is, they are given a chance to actually share their, wisdom, skills on YouTube, and they are getting paid through advertisements and other ways, and also they gain in popularity, which, in the absence of something like YouTube, they cannot gain that popularity out of TV or films, simply because the TV or films will not give them a chance. But they are taking their chance out of YouTube. So I feel from my situation, from my country situation, women are actually getting benefited out of YouTube. So has your study looked into that aspect also? Yes?
So certainly, if you look at somebody like Lacey, who's a YouTube partner, that's like her full-time job. She gets a tremendous amount of money from YouTube. This is her. So financial gain is not disputed. People have, women, men, across the gender spectrum, people have been able to become successful. But those success stories are also few and far between. The idea that people can just put yourself out there and all of a sudden you'll generate a million subscribers and all of a sudden you'll get paid. That's not really the reality. That's a bit of an American dream, of like making it on YouTube or making it on Twitter, becoming a celebrity and influencer. But what's interesting to us is what is the game that needs to be played in order to achieve commercial success. So people are trying to figure out how can I play with the male gaze a little bit in order to, get the audience, but actually educate at the same time. And, I realize that I'm doing this to myself, but I want to do it because I want to get an audience, and I want people to listen to what I have to say. So there's this way that people and women in our research are trying to play with this. They're trying to play with these ideas, but still recognizing that you can't escape this. You can't escape from sexism. You can't escape from racism. And this shows up a lot in comments as well. When we were preparing this, I was looking at comments on below Lacey's videos, and it's the comments is where humanity goes to die. I'm pretty confident. It was, like saying, I'm gonna rape you. This is, and it's like you can't even read there. But that's also the space that our vloggers said that they found the sense of community, between other people. So all of a sudden, by getting that success, by getting the popularity, you also are perhaps not inviting criticism, but certainly criticism is then launched. So it's a very difficult space. So it's one that we can't just view with pure optimism or pure skepticism, but understanding the realities of people who are actually in this space and allowing them to speak for themselves.
Thank you. I'm mad I got here a little bit late. I missed some of the earlier presentations. So I'm curious, kind of related to what we're talking about now. In India, do you find that the women have to, you're saying YouTube has opened space for all different types of women to come and to share their wisdom, et cetera. But in order for them to get the followers, do you find that the women have to kind of almost like a self-objectify? Like, do they have to, are they, I mean, we're looking at Lacey Green, and she's dressed, you know, kind of scantily clad, not all the time. I mean, but for some of the women that we see, you know, their breasts are showing, et cetera. Like, do they have to dress a certain kind of way or to get the following, to get people to actually come to see their YouTube page?
No, not necessarily, I feel. Especially, you know, like when they are sharing their skills, like cooking skills, it actually helps, you know, like there was even a comment by an old person that, you know, others comment on her that she's too old to be on YouTube. Okay, but in India, the situation is, you know, like we have people from India living in Canada, you know, and US far away, in many, you know, as many far away countries as possible. So especially even something like cooking is, you know, cookery tips are something quite basic. Still, there are younger women who are able to learn from older women. And there are, you know, number of older women who have become famous through YouTube just because they have shared their cooking skills. So not just because of their dressing. Maybe that percentage is there very, very less. Maybe, you know, like people who want to make it big in modeling and those kind of fields, maybe. Okay. But in the other categories like cooking, even, you know, sharing beauty tips, just something very basic like how to do facial. Okay. So for all this, they are in their usual attire. Some of them are in sari, traditional dress, or, you know, very well dressed or not, you know, wantedly they have to go to such ways.
Your participants, what regions do they come from? I mean, are they all like American vloggers or Canadian vloggers?
The women we followed, the 75 women we followed for 9 months, they were from all over. And any women we could find, especially who were not in the video vlogging, I mean the beauty vlogging genre. The 6 women we selected, one was from the UK, and I think all of the others are in the US, yes. They're North American, yeah.
Okay, because I was curious about like looking when you're studying these trends related to gender and
yes,
is it common just among women from, you know, the US region, or do we see these same trends?
Exactly.
I mean, because it sounds like in India that's not, maybe that's not playing a big role in the vlogging community, like, I don't.
Yeah, so, well, one thing is there's so much need to do more work on women's vlogging because a lot has changed even since we did these original interviews. Quite a bit of time has passed. And so vlogging has changed. There's many more folks. There's more access. But I guess the other question I had when you were speaking is what you said, these women become famous on the basis of a cooking show or skill sharing. In that instance, so people who study vlogging seem to describe a category that's a bit more of a niche or a personal thing. I mean, so I just wonder about the fame you're describing. Is it within the diaspora? Would it be the followers? Would they be primarily within a particular diaspora, or do they have a following that's pretty broad and wide? And is that following going to get them any financial gain in the long run?
Advertisements are the, one of the main ways where they get financial gain. So the more and more followers, the more and more advertisement they get in YouTube. So they get a share of that money, plus recognition. There are some older women till then who were not known beyond their street or beyond their house, but they suddenly, they gain a lot of popularity among that particular community. Not everyone, But maybe if it is cooking, the younger generation who want to learn cooking. If it is beauty, the women, who don't want to go to a beauty parlor, but they want to be at home and do some beauty skills. So like that, within that following, not just women, even men, as you say, the diaspora, when they move away, they have to learn to cook. When they are all by themselves, they are, eager to learn Indian cooking. Okay, so they also learn. So there are women who are, even older women, who are equally popular among men and women when they share their cooking skills, when they give them cookery tips. And same way, beauty. I mean, beauty, obviously, they have to give exclusively for ladies. But certain general things like facial, to some extent followed by men also. So
and doing anything that pushes gender norms. So, for example, our women bloggers that you're speaking of who question gender norms in their indigenous culture or gender norms in the West or...
Yes, there are bloggers like that who actually question, who question, their own cultural norms. And even there are, when there is chauvinism, male chauvinism, questioning that. And there are a few who are even questioning political situation, commenting on political situation in the country or in the particular state. Yes, there are definitely women like that. But talking about the financial gain, which you raised in the last question, obviously I feel these type of bloggers may not get much of financial gain. Those who share the skill, obviously cooking, beauty, etc., who go by that gender stereotype, obviously they get some financial gain through ads. But what happens when you take this type of women, they make use of YouTube as a channel for themselves to vent their anger. When they are very angry with men or when they are very angry with the political setup, then they make use of YouTube. So they get a lot of comments, some against them, some for them. Okay, so in that case, their only achievement or, if they get some gratification by sharing their anger and by sharing their emotions, which without a YouTube, without that medium, they may not be able to do that. Because not all the magazines or newspapers are going to allow their views. Okay, so in a way, to help them to just give a vent to their emotions.
So in your the network diagram that you developed, what was the process in actually trying to map these this activism, if we can not call it that, in the
data?
What's the process in actually developing
first of all,
that?
I studied, the whole project was started from the analysis of the Quran, Islamic feminism and women's movements in Egypt especially, not in Saudi Arabia that much because it's a very young country. And then from there, trying to understand what was the main issues that had been discussed, that had emerged throughout the century. So I started from the turn of the 20th century, and I kind of created a list. And then based on that, I started researching on the internet. So getting in touch with, the beginning was just creating Boolean search terms, and so it was all about Boolean, sort of trying to grasp, kind of touch and feel what was going on online. And when I started with English, then of course I had to include Arabic as well. And then I started to have a list of blogs, and then from there I started to analyze each and every of them. I didn't rely only on hyperlink tools. I had to do it myself, so I use R. And then for the rendering, I use Gephi. But I had to read each and every of them because every post is either in English or in Arabic. And sometimes in Arabic there are numbers, so 7, 3, and the software didn't really pick it up. Then I got in touch with some of the bloggers, and I just started conversations with them. And then there is a good community of Saudi in London, so I started discussing with them. So, and that's but the data was basically I based on hyperlinks, but then I categorized each and every hyperlink. So I created different categories, analyzing each and every post. So I read the whole post and I kind of summarized with specific issue, so what is that specific blog talking about, and then major issue, so it's kind of macro category. It was not what I really wanted to do, but it was the only way, because at the moment the network is the only answer you sort of have to create the community or to understand what's going on. Yeah, so, and then sorry.
Oh, no, you continue.
And then I try to understand what are the differences between what feminists say, what is in the papers, and what is the bloggers talk about, and what are the issues the country has been accused of or has been actually moving on and has, resolved, and so on and so on and so forth. But yeah.
We've got some great discussion going, and we've got about 5 minutes left, so I just want to maybe give some other people an opportunity to speak. I think Gretchen is itching over here with a question, so are you able to pass her the mic? Thanks.
One was for the case study that you did in Saudi Arabia. I was curious what the repercussions of this sort of online, not exactly activism is, in terms of the state collecting IP addresses if women are participating anonymously, using this to interrogate them, intimidate them, or imprison them. I'm just wondering, because it's in my experience in doing research on community radio in Jordan, a lot of people talked about the criminalization of their activism through social media. So a lot of activists, especially women activists, talked about having to make choices in their social media use, and even their presence in social media spaces as activists, and some women in particular choosing not to present themselves as activists in social media so as to not be tracked or intimidated in that way. And then I had a question for the India case studies that you offered. I was wondering if the summaries that you included at the bottom about impact on some of the slides, if that was done through audience research, or if that was the women who were participating as hosts, producers, scripters within the station. So it was more just about your methodology in developing the case studies, if you had used audience research.
Shall I answer first? Yeah, I go first. As for the repercussions, there have been cases of women have been arrested, but luckily they have been released. They always talk about the issue as well. So the issue is, especially for the driving ban, and I talk about the driving ban because on Twitter it receives sometimes it is attacked because it's like, oh, it's a rich person's sort of issue. But to me, it's very much, I link it very much to very small campaign at the turn of the 20th century, which was the scientific domesticity, which was massive in the Maghreb. And so these women have been intimidated. To me, it's not just because they have been driving the car that they wanted to drive. It's more because I think they are actually raising the issue. So they have been incarcerated. I'm just assuming here that given even the status, like some of them come from a good, wealthy background. That doesn't really count too much when it comes to being too direct with the government, like the case of the activist that has been is waiting to be trialed now. But in their case, they have always been released. But there have been cases in which they have been arrested, they've been detained, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and I think it's more not just because of the car, but it's more because they are taking they're going one step forward. They're not just going online, they're actually taking the cars and they're driving. So they kind of, we do own the space, we are part of. So.
Yeah, talking about audience research, yes, partially. For example, I mentioned about Anna Community Radio, which is the first campus community radio and is run by our own university. There we could do a kind of audience research because, the community is quite nearby and they keep coming to the station to produce programs. And one more campus community radio, that Holy Cross community radio, which is also a campus community radio, and that is within Tamil Nadu, our own state. So with these two kind of stations, we were able to do a kind of audience research. But with the other community radio stations which are quite far away, Just like in Canada, how we have to travel long. Yesterday when I was enquiring, they told to, travel to Thunder Bay, the other campus of this university, you should undergo some 14 hours travel. So like, in India, you have places where you go by train. Also, it takes 2 to 3 days. So at present, we couldn't do that, but you have given a real good idea. Maybe we can employ people over there to do the kind of audience research and get more very scientific and authentic data at the end of it.
One quick follow-up that I forgot to ask. Very quick. The case studies that you presented, in each of them, you talked about the focus of the radio stations. I would, in terms of content, like one was a health radio and so on and so forth. I'm wondering if there's restrictions on what can be discussed. So, for example, can these stations cover news? And are they free to cover whatever kind of content they want? Or are they locked into only covering health issues, for example? So it's just more clarity on sort of the freedom of the stations to cover. I'm particularly interested in like news content that's related to politics. And I know that there's some work being done in India to kind of limit the tendency for a lot of media to inflame sectarianism. So that's why I'm concerned particularly about news, because I know that that's been a concern in India and in broadcast media contributing to that. So are community stations free to cover news and how they want?
So now, as per the legal regulations in India, we have separate set of law for media, like how it happens in each country. We have separate set of law for media in India. Even I am an author of the book titled Media Law and Ethics. So, as per the law, not just community radio station, even the other FM, which is for entertainment, they can't run news. As per the present existing system in India, only the public broadcaster, that is All India Radio, they alone can give news through radio. But the contradiction is that in TV it is allowed. The private channels come out with their own news bulletin. They have specialized news channels. But in radio, as of now, only All India Radio can come out with a full news bulletin. The others can share current affairs, but not news. That's the situation.
Okay, so we've got about 1 minute left. I know there's a couple of you over here we haven't heard from. Do you guys happen to have any just quick questions or? Okay, great. Dr. Neelamalar, would you mind passing the mic? Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about, I don't know if I know that there's an organization called Global Voice Online, which I don't know if you talked about in your presentation either. Okay, so I wanted to ask you what are you thinking about this, about this organization? Are they working? Is it working for the Arabic blogs? Because I know that they try to, unite them and finance them, or in case of, for example, if they're abused by police or by the government, they try to find them. Exactly. So.
In the case of Saudi Arabia, it's they are very much linked to UN, to Global Voices Online, to Human Rights Watch. These organizations do contribute, and there is a link. And in Saudi Arabia, like Egypt, is more what I call an ego network. So each blogger links to himself on Twitter, on Facebook, and so on and so forth. In Saudi Arabia, each blogger links to the other bloggers as well. So there is a sort of community. The thing, what I have learned all these years is that whenever there is some, it has to be local. It has to come from the locals, because everything that comes from outside can be attacked as being from the West. So it has to be, and that's one of the reasons why I had to learn to read the Arabic, because it's always from the outside. So they do rely a lot, they work a lot with international organizations and human rights organizations and so on and so forth, but it always comes from them. I have understood that they actually know their world so well that they don't need any direction, but they do work with them. But it's never in a way of, oh yeah, we're listening to you. It's always like, well, I know it's that is really that's striking, really, because they do know what they're talking about. They know where they're coming from. They know their belongings. They're not questioning that. They're questioning the craziness of certain applications of a Sharia that it's nowhere, it's written nowhere. Doctrines is not written nowhere, and they do work very, very much, but never taking orders from or never following. It's always a sort of mutual communication and collaboration. Yeah.
My mic is on here. Looks like we unfortunately will need to wrap up, but of course we're having great discussion, so please feel free to continue these conversations at any point and make those connections while you're here. And I guess just to finish up, I just want to say thank you to Chiara, Dr. Neelamalar, Megan Boler, and Jenna Jacobson. So thank you all for coming and presenting your amazing material and giving us lots of good discussion as well. Thanks.